Happy Monday, everybody. We are recording this on Friday, actually, and this is kind of just a small podcast that we're doing, an episode to talk about upcoming rebrand we're doing of the podcast. And we are going to be changing the name of the podcast from the EmberMap Podcast, which has been known for the last, what has this been, 3 years now?
Yeah, I think so.
90, 93, 94 episodes. I remember when you were like, we're never going to do a podcast. And here we are.
Now it's my favorite thing.
Coming in on episode 100. But yeah, we've been the EmberMap Podcast for about 3 years. That's because we run a company called EmberMap. We started 3 years ago, maybe more, and we make Ember videos. And, you know, over the past few years, we've been meeting lots of people outside of the Ember community at conferences like MicroConf or, other non-Ember conferences, JS conferences, testing conferences. And so every time we did, what would happen basically is, you know, we would talk to them about Ember. And, you know, Ember has a really strong community, but it's also this kind of tight-knit community that's been around together for a while. And so there's a lot of folks, if you didn't really get into Ember, back when we did really in the earlier days, like you're not really likely to learn it as a boot camp student, right? You're not likely to get introduced to it as much as some other technology. But so we would start talking about Ember with folks we'd meet at these conferences, and then they'd be interested in what we had to say. We'd tell them about the podcast, they'd hear it, and then they would start listening. And so we just started having people listening to our podcast who were like not Ember developers, but they really liked what we had to say because, you know, our podcast is about Ember, but it's we also talk on these kind of higher levels, the higher concepts that are not really specific to Ember. So long story short, as more and more people who were outside of Ember started listening, and also the topics of our conversation changed from being more specifically about Ember APIs to other things, we decided it was time to change the name and hopefully really with the goal of trying to get more people exposed to it and to make it easier to kind of share and spread around the community. So that was what led to us wanting to change the name. And so then it was a question of, well, what should we name it? And so, yeah, do you remember how that conversation went?
I have no idea, but I'm sure there's tons of bike shedding.
As always. You know, we have been focused on front-end development for a while. You obviously already know the name of the podcast, the new upcoming rename because of the title of the episode. That name is Frontend First. And when we started talking about this, you know, we are obviously big on front-end development. It's what we've specialized in. But, Ryan has a much deeper background in back-end development, and I've also done full-stack development. I mean, my first year programming, I was using Perl scripts to read in custom data formats. I was setting up master-slave replicas in MySQL at a financial software company, and then I got into web development through PHP and Symfony. So I've done it all, you know, and I just fell in love with front-end development. And so, you know, even to this day, as much as we focused on, you know, JavaScript architecture and kind of modern UI development and programming, I mean, the last few months, what have we been talking about? You know, CDN deployments and, globally replicated databases. And, you know, we like to talk about everything. But I think one overriding principle of both of us, and also I think that a lot of the audience shares, is this notion of focusing on the front end experience, and that's why so many people do get bit by the JavaScript bug, because they fall in love with delivering an experience to the end user that feels really good, that feels rich, that feels like we've all come to expect software to feel from Apple and from our mobile devices. And, you know, a lot of us on the web are trying to make things feel as intuitive and responsive and fast as we're used to on these really nice native applications. So I think that's what drives a lot of us. And so, yeah, that's kind of after a little bike shedding and debates, we landed on Frontend First, because everything we do comes back to the front end. And this is not so much the front end as in like the JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, even though that is part of what it means. It's really the front end of your product and the user touch point. So whether that's even like a terminal application, a CLI, right? What is the front end of that? it's the prompts, it's the warning messages, it's the coloring. And you can, even just today, I was working on NPM and Yarn in 2 different projects, and like Yarn puts a lot more emphasis in their front end than NPM does. It's like way more pleasant to use. It's like easier to understand what's going on, and that kind of stuff is important to us. And even extending into some of our consulting work, some of what we've talked about in the show before is like, what does the front end mean in that context? And we've talked about shipping slices of functionality once at a time, and how important that aspect of consulting is to us, because you're focused on what is the user value that you're actually delivering, and how everything else is derived from that. So in the same way we like outside in development, where we start with a front end as static as possible, maybe even a mock-up, and show it to someone before going to the back end, and letting the front end experience and the needs of the front end drive everything else down. We apply that same ideology, I guess, to our consulting and to other applications that aren't traditional GUI applications. So we felt like Frontend First really encapsulated a lot of what we believe about the best way to build software. And so, yeah, that's kind of where the name came from.
You know what the best thing about your explanation was? Is that when we stop doing front end development, we won't have to rename to something else, because you just broadened what front end meant. So I love that.
Exactly. And that is part of, we love Ember. It's how I cut my teeth on UI programming, and it's going to it's left an indelible mark on how I approach building a UI for the web forever. And so even as we experience and explore other technologies, we're still doing a lot of Ember. Ember still has a big place in our hearts and our repertoire and our expertise. It does suck that we are talking about concepts that many other people in the community have a lot to say about. We go to the Svelte meetup and we sit there and have a 4-hour conversation with Rich, and we're talking about all the same things. And if we weren't there, he would have never found our podcast, and never thought we would have had, like-minded things to say, because it's like, in the same reason I would never get an iOS developers podcast, because unless I met someone, right? Because I'm not an iOS developer. Yep. So it's like, it's just not really representative of what the show is. So, yes, that is also part of the goal, is that no matter how the lower level things that we use on a day-to-day basis evolve, we don't have to rename the podcast again, and we can talk about these things from a kind of philosophical perspective that we believe in.
Yep. And we're just renaming the podcast, so there's no new podcast to go subscribe to or anything like that.
Exactly. We decided on, instead of starting a new podcast, this is going to be the exact same show. So it's the same exact show. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. In the last few months, like I was saying, we've been talking a lot about Next.js and CDNs and global distribution. We just talk about whatever is going on in our life that week. So it's going to be the same show. Yep. It's just going to be called Frontend First, and it's going to have some new artwork as well, which I'm excited about.
Nice. Is the artwork going to be out when we listen to this?
Oh, it is. Oh, wait, not when we listen to this, because this is a preview episode. It's the first time we're letting the audience know via the podcast that, well, we have talked about this. I think we talked about this like 2 months ago, that we were going to, we had picked Frontend First, and we wanted to rebrand the podcast. But this is like happening in the next 2 episodes. So this episode will have the current artwork and the current name. And it's as a way to let folks know, because they're going to open their podcast players and they're going to see that they subscribe to something called Frontend First, and they're going to see different artwork. So there's going to be confusion there, but the alternative is like making a new podcast, but it's not a new podcast. So we're doing our best to help, ameliorate the confusion there. So that's what this is all about, basically. And so our next episode will just be a full episode, and it'll be called Introducing Frontend First. We can maybe talk a little bit more about it, and then talk about our normal stuff. And at that point, the title and the podcast art will be changed over. So.
Okay. And then since we're at episode 93, do we have to like put like a 1 dot in front of it now? Like what is the
season? We change the season or something like that?
Change the season. Okay.
I think we just got to keep going with it. And all of us original listeners will know deep down, when we hit 100, that's EmberMap Podcast version 100 right there.
Yep.
That's how we started. That's where our roots are. Even though it'll be Front End First episode 100, it'll be really Front End First episode 7 or something like that. But I'm not going to deal with seasons. If anyone wants to tell me I should be doing that, maybe I'll do that if you show me how. No. But yeah, that's it's one for us. It's one continuous story of kind of our day-to-day life. Doing JavaScript programming mostly. So. That's really all I wanted to say, just to give you some preparation. And again, I know even in spite how much we prepare, I think it'll just be there will be some confusion, but that's just the trade-off that we wanted to make. And we'd rather keep shipping you the show because it's the same show. It's not changing at all. So other than the name. So yeah, that's what this is all about.
Awesome, man.
You're excited?
I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. I really am too. And again, it's not even so much about Ember as it is all the folks who aren't doing Ember. And I feel like I want to welcome into the conversation and have them find these conversations from YouTube and other places where we publish. And, now it'll feel, I think it'll be easier to get more guests on the show, who are not in the Ember community, but have a lot to say about the things that we talk about, and for people to recommend the show to their friends who aren't Ember developers. So that's kind of what I'm really looking forward to, and just feeling better about publishing every week, to something that has a little bit longer longevity to it, and a more of a timeless name that really represents what it is we talk about. So I'm super stoked about that. We got a custom artist to do some art for us, and that's been fun. I know I always I'm like a perfectionist about this stuff, so I've been helping out and maybe spending too much time on it. But I'm really happy with where it is. I think it's pretty cool. It's a cartoon version of me and you, and I think it looks pretty awesome with New York in the background. So that's going to be really fun to see that every week. So I'm excited. And if you have any feedback or anything you want to say about it, we'd love to hear from you. And just excited to get a YouTube channel going and eventually a website. We're going to start with a simple website. We have learned some things in 3 years. And one of them is to use an auto-generated website if it exists for you, instead of pouring months of effort into something.
But what about those sweet CDN deployments?
I know. Those are sweet. I also want to be a lot better once we get this project over with in general, of getting highlights from our shows, because our shows tend to go on for a long time, and I hear the feedback of people who are regular listeners that they like it, but it also does make it hard for new people to discover because it's like an all or nothing thing. And there are many good tidbits. So that would be another fun thing to explore, especially if we had a Front End First, YouTube channel, posting clips there. I think that could be really cool. So
yep.
We also have some more ideas for what we want to do with the Front End First brand in the future. We started doing some live streaming on YouTube, and we have some ideas for kind of more 10-minute length videos / shows we could do on a Front End First YouTube channel. So I'm also excited about that. Just feels like a cool brand. Feels like something that'll be a good outlet for our creativity.
Yep.
So, that's really all we got for you today. Man, I'm going crazy with this quarantine stuff. Honestly, this week was tough for me. It's just been it's just a bummer.
Do you know what week it is? It's like week 4,
It's got to be 4 or 5.
I felt like this week was the toughest for me.
Yeah.
Heck. Not in a linear scale. It was just a little tougher than last week. It was oh man, this really sucks.
It's miserable. Yeah. And there's been weeks where I was basically forgot about it and just went around my business normally, But for some reason this week was really tough. Every day I thought I was going to swing out of it, but I didn't. And so maybe I'll just try to take it easy this weekend, do some cooking, do some running, just to unwind a little bit. But all that to say, hope you all are doing well too, and doing the best you can during this crazy time. It is pretty wild. I'm looking forward to it being over. Our thoughts are definitely with everyone who has it worse than us, because as hard as it is for us, at the end of the day, not much to complain about versus a lot of folks. So, we're looking forward to this, and so we should have another full episode out probably Wednesday or Thursday. And again, it'll be called Introducing Front End First. And when you see that, that's what this means. It means that we've rebranded the podcast. You should see some new artwork. You should recognize me and Ryan and my smiling faces there. So be on the lookout for that. All right.
Cool.
Well, I hope everyone has a great week, and we'll see you in the next one.
See ya.
Bye-bye.